Alright, so in the last video we talked a little bit about array list. And then I tried to show you a little bit, hopefully it made sense. But the key thing to take away is when adding stuff to an array, it starts at position 0, and then so that's your first position. Then your second position is 1, 2, 3, and so on. So if you have, say, 4 players, your first one's going to be in position 0, your last one's going to be in position 3. Alright, so I told you to build a loop down here to basically add those players into our array list up here. So to do that, let me go ahead and pop in a for loop, and then we'll walk through a for loop just in case you don't know, but hopefully you know by this point in your programming. Alright, so this is a for loop. And basically you have the word for with an open and closed parentheses, and then 3 different things that you're going to do within this loop. And we'll go into those in just a minute. And then you have an open and closed curly bracket, and the stuff you're going to do is going to be inside the loop here. So the beginning, the first thing that we're doing is we're basically initializing a counter. Alright? And so you have to say int, you have to basically say what it is, and in this case it's going to be an int. You got to give it a name. I call mine I. Like I say, these are things that if you do enough coding over time, you'll just come up with your own little thing. And like I say, mine always start with I, and then the next one will be J, K, and so on. Alright? And then you set it to 0. You have to initialize it. You can't just say int I. Alright, and then you do a semicolon, and you should be familiar with the semicolon by now. It basically means the end of a line or that portion of the command. So we've initialized a variable. Now we're going to set a condition. Now for this, because we want to add however many players that the user gives us. So if they say 2 players, we only want to prompt them for 2 names. If they say 5 players, we want to prompt them for 5. If they say 10, we want to prompt them for 10. And it won't go to 11, or it won't come up short. So as long as I is less than num players, we're going to do whatever's in this loop. And then at the end of the loop, after everything's been run, we're going to increment I by 1. So let's go through this. So if I say I want 2 players, int I equals 0 on the first pass. So I, or 0, is less than 2, because that's the number I put in. We're going to do something in here, and then we're going to increment I by 1, which means now it's 1. And then we're going to check, is 1 less than 2? And it is. So we're going to do something in here, and then we're going to increment I by 1. Now it's 2. And then we're going to check it, is 2 less than 2? And no, 2 is not less than 2, which means it's going to break the loop and then come out here and tell me all is good. Alright, so the things that I wanted you to do in the loop. I wanted you to prompt the user, okay, or prompt the player for their name. So once again, just like up here, now we did a do while loop up here. Okay, so down here, we're using it in the for loop, but we can still use this print. Actually, let's go ahead and copy this one, because I want it to be a print rather than a print line. So Control C to copy, Control V to paste. Alright, and so I'm going to say, please enter player, and then whatever player we're on, their name. Alright, so that would be done just like this. Enter player, and then of course, remember, I is a counter. All right, and that first position, or 0, we start counting at 0 because just like our array, we want that stuff to be at 0, right? So enter player. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. The way it's set up here, if we get 0, it's going to say enter player 0's name. Now most people, if you're not in computer science, are going to think that that's just stupid. All right, so we want to make it 1's name. So to do that, we're not going to change the value of I at this point. We're just going to manipulate it a little bit by adding 1 to I. All right, so now if you think about it, on the first pass, it's going to say enter player, and then I plus 1, or 0 plus 1 would be 1's name, all right, because you got the apostrophe S over here. And then on the second pass, if this is changed to 1, it would be 2's name, 3's name, and so on and so forth till you get to the end of your players. All right, so if they popped in 10 here, we would go through it 10 times, but I would only be as high as 9, okay, because 0 to 9. And once it got to 9, of course, it would run through the loop, but then it would get incremented to 10, and 10 is not less than 10. So, and that's the way that for loop works. All right, so we've prompted them, but now we got to get their input. All right, and once again, if we're getting input, we just go up here and call scanner. All right. Now here's where things change a little bit. So we're going to do SC dot, and in this one, we're just going to use next because we're getting a string. Now I don't know if you remember, but if you go back and you type in scanner, Java scanner class, and then you look it up, if you remember, next and next line both accepted strings, which we're putting in on this one. So I'm going to use next versus next line because I tried next line and had some issues with it going through the loop twice. So I was already on player 2 before it would let me enter a name, but next didn't do that, so I'm using next. All right, and then of course, you follow that with a semicolon. And this gets the input. It doesn't store it into anything. So now one of the things is you can go and you can read on ArrayList, but I'm going to give you the 3 main things that you're going to need for this program. One is .add to add the player or score into the array. The other one that we're going to use is .get to get something out of the array. So when we go to get their name and their score, in the game for their turn, that's how we're going to get it. And the other one is .set to basically change the value of their score. So if they rolled the snake eyes, we would do .set, all right, to change their score to 0. All right, so getting back in here, we're going to call whatever array list. We're going to add, get, or set. And then we're going to do the appropriate thing. So in this case, we're going to do .add. All right. So let me go ahead and move that out of here. So when I do .add, this is the good thing about this particular IDE. You can see here it says add, and we're going to put a string into arg0. All right. It's going to be in parentheses. And our string is going to be whatever they inputted, the sc.next. So I'm going to cut that by hitting Control X and then paste that over the arg0. with Control V. All right. Clean that up a little bit. Now, this should add whatever they enter into, on the first pass, position 0 or index 0. On the second pass, index 1, 2, 3, and so on. All right, so that's adding or putting in their names, but I also told you we need to put in their scores in the scores database, or not database, array list. If you hear me say database, I'm talking about the array list. All right, so we need to do scores add, and once again, you'll see it recognizes what the array list is, and it's going to tell me I need to enter an integer. All right, so you see add. Once again, you got the parentheses, but it's going to take an integer in arg0 because that's the way I set it up there in that left arrow, right arrow. Remember, string for players, integer for scores. So let me do open close parentheses. And arg0 will be 0 because that's what we're setting all their scores to. So you just type in a 0, and then don't forget your semicolon at the end of the line. So if this all, and it looks good to me, so I say enter player 1's name on the first pass, and then prompt them for a name. So let's just say that they enter Joseph, and then they hit enter. It's going to add that. Then it's going to go ahead and add that because I'm not stopping them and asking them for any input. And then it's going to loop through to the second player for as many players as I got. So let's go ahead and test this. And then once I get down to the end of the players, so we're going to use 4 players on this first one. Then after all the players are added, it should say all is good because it'll break the loop once I basically get to 4 players. All right, so here we go. Now, once again, we have to enter this. All right, we're not using it yet. And now our players. So 4 players, enter player 1's name. I'm going to put Joseph. All right, player 2, we'll go with Cherish. Player 3 is Jensen. And player 4 is Lily. Now when I hit enter, of course, it's going to go up because basically I want 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, as soon as I hit enter, it adds 1 to I, which makes it 4. Now 4 is not less than 4 because that's what number of players were. So it's going to break the loop and it should print out all is good. So let me go down here and try that, and all is good. Now I could ask you to trust me that those values are in players and scores. But if you want to check it, which we're going to do here, I'm going to create another for loop, so I could basically just take this for loop, copy it, paste it, get rid of that all is good because I don't need that right now. And for this though, I'm going to take that players. All right, I'm going to use the size of players. And as you can see, this IntelliSense, it kind of tells you right here. So it's going to be size, open, close, parentheses. And you see I don't have any red lines in there, so it's all good. So player size right now, since we entered 4 names, okay, now of course we're done with the program, but we'll go back and redo it. I'll use 4 more names. But anyways, player.size should be the same as num players. All right, because we entered 4 here. We went through a loop, entered 4 names. So the size will be 4, even though the highest value is 3. it's still 4 items in there. Now, and also remember that scores, because we're doing the same thing with scores, we're adding those indexes or scores for each of the players. So technically you could change that to scores as well, but players makes more sense, all right, because that's what we're focusing on. Then down here, of course, we don't want to add anything, but we want to print out the player's name, and then we'll just say has a score of, and then we'll get the score out of the scores array. And remember how I said to do that? We're going to do, for getting the name, we're going to say players.get, and then in parentheses, we're going to go to the position or the index. And remember, the way you get the index is just by using I. All right, and something that I do want to point out here, just in case you're a little worried, you can use I as many times as you want as long as it's not within the same scope. Now, I being used here, it's only good within this for loop. So it's not affecting this I, and this I is not affecting that I. So I could use it down here again. I don't like to do that, so I'm going to change it to J. But you can use it. In fact, I'll just leave it that way for this pass so that you can see that it will work. All right, so let me go ahead and change some things in here. All right, so I went ahead and made the changes, and basically what I did is, first of all, I changed it back to a print line so that basically it gives you a line feed at the end. Otherwise, they're all back to back to back, and it doesn't look that good. So we go in, we say players.get whatever the I is set to. All right, so position 0 on the first pass. And then has a score of, and then we go into the scores.get I. All right, because we want them to be the same. And it should print out whatever the first name is, has a score of 0. Whatever the second name is, has a score of 0, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and run this. And once again, we've got to enter our dice. And then players. We'll go with 4 again. And this time we'll use Selena, Jason, Dwayne, and Renee. All right, now I'm at the end of this first for loop. So as before, you remember when I hit enter, I came out and I printed all is good because it left that for loop and continued on in my code. But I've pulled that out and put this other for loop in here. So this time I'm not forcing it to stop for any reason. So it's just going to print out, basically, should be Selena has a score of 0, Jason, Dwayne, Renee, and then of course they all have a score of 0. So let me go back down here and run it. And there you go. Selena has a score of 0, Jason has a score of 0, Dwayne has a score of 0, Renee has a score of 0. All right, so that's pretty much it for setting up our players, where we can basically call them back in later on. All right, so you can go ahead and, well, we're not going to delete that for loop because we're going to use it, because remember what I said, we've got a couple different loops that we need. Now this one was just for getting the players, but for our game, we need to loop through those players. So since we've already got this, we might as well keep it. We will be changing this here and actually doing some stuff to loop through our players in the upcoming video. And then within that, we'll have to loop through our game or rolling the dice. All right, so stick around. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.